The man who'd called her too fat to fit through warehouse doors now stood in front of her, broken and desperate, clutching a cane like his life depended on it. "Please, Sarah," Robert Harrison whispered, his voice cracking with desperation. "I know what I said was wrong and I need your help." She looked him straight in the eye. This confident woman in medical scrubs who'd lost 120 pounds and found herself remembering every cruel word, every tear she'd cried in that grocery store bathroom. This was her moment of truth. Would she choose revenge or redemption? The choice would define everything. Now let me tell you all about the day that changed everything for Sarah Mae Johnson. Picture this, an 18-year-old girl, carrying more weight than she should, standing in front of the gleaming glass doors of Harrison Construction Company, the biggest employer in Millfield. Her heart was beating so fast, she thought it might burst right out of her chest. "You can do this, Sarah Mae," she whispered to herself, clutching that job application like it was her lifeline. And honey, it really was. See, her mama Betty had been laid off from the textile factory 3 months ago, and her daddy Frank was breaking his back at 2 part-time jobs just to keep their little apartment. Her 12-year-old brother Tommy needed new school clothes, and the electricity bill was past due again. Sarah Mae pushed through those heavy doors, her work boots squeaking on the polished floor. The receptionist, a skinny blonde with perfect makeup, looked her up and down like she was something unpleasant stuck to her shoe. "I'm here about the warehouse position," Sarah Mae said, her voice shaking just a little. "Fill this out and wait over there," the woman said coldly, not even looking up from her computer. For 2 hours, Sarah Mae sat on that uncomfortable plastic chair, watching other applicants come and go. Strong-looking men mostly, but she knew she could work just as hard. She'd been helping her daddy move furniture and do construction cleanup since she was 14. Finally, a tall man in an expensive suit walked out, Mr. Harrison himself. Sarah Mae's stomach dropped when she saw his face, the way his eyes narrowed when he looked at her like she was some kind of joke. "Sarah Johnson?" he called out, but his tone already told her everything she needed to know. She stood up, smoothing her best dress shirt, and walked toward him with as much dignity as she could manage. "Sir, I'm real strong and I work harder than anybody. I can lift heavy boxes, organize inventory, whatever you need." "Stop right there," Mr. Harrison cut her off, his voice loud enough for everyone in that lobby to hear. "You think I'm going to hire someone who can barely fit through my warehouse doors? Get out of here before you embarrass yourself more than you already have." The silence in that lobby was deafening. Sarah Mae felt every pair of eyes on her, felt the heat of shame crawling up her neck like fire. And that's when her whole world crumbled, right there on that shiny floor. Sarah Mae stood there frozen, feeling like the whole world was staring at her. Mr. Harrison's cruel words echoed in that fancy lobby like thunder in a storm. "Do you think I'm going to hire someone who can barely fit through my warehouse doors?" The receptionist smirked behind her desk, and Sarah Mae heard someone in the waiting area snicker. Her face burned hotter than a summer sidewalk as she clutched her purse and tried to walk to the exit with whatever dignity she had left. But her legs felt like jelly, and every step toward those glass doors felt like walking through quicksand. The security guard held the door open for her, and she caught the pity in his eyes, which somehow hurt worse than the cruelty. "Ma'am," he whispered as she passed, "don't let him get to you. He's mean to everybody." But Sarah Mae couldn't even look at him. She just nodded and stumbled out into the bright afternoon sun, where the heat hit her like a slap in the face. The bus ride home was pure torture. She squeezed into the back seat, avoiding everyone's eyes, replaying Mr. Harrison's words over and over. "Barely fit through my warehouse doors." Each word cut deeper than the last. When she finally got to their little apartment on Maple Street, she could hear her mama in the kitchen, probably fixing dinner with whatever they had left in the fridge. The smell of fried potatoes and onions, their usual meal when money was tight, made her stomach turn. "Sarah Mae? That you, honey?" Betty called out, hope ringing in her voice. "How'd it go at the interview?" Sarah Mae couldn't answer. She just stood there in the doorway looking at her mama's tired face, at Tommy doing homework at their wobbly kitchen table, at her daddy sleeping in his chair after another back-breaking day of work. They were all counting on her. They needed that job so bad and she'd failed them. Again. The tears came then, hot and angry and full of shame. Betty dropped her spatula and rushed over, wrapping her daughter in arms that smelled like dish soap and love. "Oh, baby, what happened?" she whispered. "He said..." Sarah Mae's voice cracked like broken glass. "He said I was too fat to even fit through his doors, Mama." In front of everybody. They all heard him. Betty's heart broke right there in that tiny kitchen, but she held her daughter tighter. "That man don't know what he's missing, sugar. You're worth 10 of him." But Sarah May wasn't hearing comfort right then. All she could hear was laughter echoing in her head, and the terrible truth that maybe, just maybe, Mr. Harrison was right about her. The next 3 days were pure agony for Sarah May. She couldn't even look at herself in the bathroom mirror without hearing Mr. Harrison's cruel words echoing in her head. "Barely fit through my warehouse doors." Those words played on repeat, like a broken record, torturing her every waking moment. She barely left her bedroom, telling her mama she had a headache when really her heart was the thing that was aching. Betty would bring her plates of food, but Sarah May couldn't stomach much of anything. The shame was eating her alive from the inside out. On Thursday morning, Betty knocked softly on her door. "Honey, Mrs. Patterson from next door stopped by. She heard about what happened at Harrison's." Sarah May's stomach dropped. What did she say? Well, Betty hesitated, not wanting to hurt her daughter more. She said her cousin works there and word's getting around the neighborhood that you got turned away pretty harsh. The humiliation hit Sarah May like a freight train. Now everybody knew. The whole neighborhood was probably talking about the fat girl who couldn't even get a warehouse job. She buried her face in her pillow and sobbed until no more tears would come. That evening, Frank came home from his construction job, his work boots heavy on the kitchen floor. Sarah May heard him talking to Betty in hushed tones. "The electric company called again," he said, his voice thick with worry. "We got till Monday to pay or they're shutting us off." "Tommy needs new shoes for school," Betty whispered back. "His toes are sticking through the ones he's got." Sarah May pressed her ear to the door, listening to her parents' quiet desperation. This was all her fault. If she'd gotten that job, they wouldn't be struggling like this. If she wasn't so heavy, maybe Mr. Harrison would have given her a chance. Later that night, she knelt beside her bed and prayed like she never had before. "Lord, I don't know what to do. I feel so lost and worthless. Please show me a way to help my family. Please give me strength to keep going." But even as she prayed, doubt crept into her heart like poison. Maybe she really was too big, too weak, too much of a burden on everyone she loved. Friday morning brought the worst blow yet. Betty came into her room with tears in her eyes, holding a letter from the electric company. "Baby," she said softly, "your daddy had to take a third job stacking boxes at night. We can't afford for you to give up looking for work." And that's when Sarah May realized that her pain was hurting everyone she loved most. That Friday night, something inside Sarah May snapped. Not in a bad way, more like a rubber band that had been stretched too tight, finally finding its true shape. She sat on her bed, looking at her daddy's work boots by the door, caked with mud from his third job, and made a decision that would change everything. "I ain't gonna be the reason my family suffers anymore," she whispered to herself, wiping away the last tears she'd allow herself to cry in self-pity. Saturday morning, she put on her best clothes and walked straight to Miller's grocery store on 5th Street. Mrs. Rodriguez, the manager, was stacking cans when Sarah May approached. "Ma'am, I know I don't look like much," Sarah May said, her voice shaking but determined. "But I need work real bad. I'll do anything, mop floors, stock shelves, clean bathrooms. I'll work harder than anybody." "Mrs." Rodriguez looked at this young woman with swollen eyes and wrinkled clothes, and something in Sarah May's voice made her pause. "Can you lift 50-pound boxes, honey?" she asked gently. "I'll learn how, ma'am. I'll get stronger." That afternoon, Sarah May started her first shift. The work was brutal. Her back ached from bending over, her arms burned from carrying heavy loads, and her feet throbbed in her old shoes. But every time the pain got too much, she thought about Tommy's torn sneakers and her daddy working 3 jobs. By Wednesday, her hands were covered in blisters. By Friday, she could barely climb the stairs to their apartment. But she didn't quit. "You're killing yourself, baby," Betty said, watching her daughter collapse on the couch after another 12-hour shift. "No, Mama," Sarah May said, groaning as she pulled off her shoes. "I'm saving myself, and I'm saving our family too." Mrs. Rodriguez noticed how hard Sarah May worked. While other employees took smoke breaks, Sarah May kept stocking. While others complained about heavy lifting, Sarah May just gritted her teeth and pushed through. "You know what, Sarah?" Mrs. Rodriguez said one evening as they closed up. "I've had skinny boys who couldn't do half what you do. Size don't mean a thing when you got heart like yours." For the first time in weeks, Sarah May smiled a real smile. Maybe Mr. Harrison was wrong about her. Maybe her worth wasn't measured by her dress size, but by the size of her determination. And that night, as she counted her first week's pay, enough to help with the electric bill, Sarah May realized something powerful. The strongest muscle in her body wasn't in her arms or legs. It was beating right there in her chest, 3 months into working at Miller's Grocery, Sarah May was pushing herself harder than ever. She'd started walking to work instead of taking the bus, a 40-minute trek each way, telling herself it was to save money, but deep down knowing she needed every bit of exercise she could get. The physical changes were slow, but they were there. Her work pants felt a little looser, and she could carry those 50-pound boxes without gasping for breath like she used to. But the real change was happening inside her head. Every morning she'd look in that cracked bathroom mirror and make herself a promise. Today I'm going to be stronger than yesterday. But Lord, the road was rough. Some days the pain in her back was so bad she could barely stand up straight. Other days, her feet would swell up so much she had to soak them in ice water just to get her shoes off. One particularly brutal Tuesday, she was stocking the frozen food section when she heard familiar laughter behind her. Her blood ran cold as she turned around and saw 3 girls from her high school, Ashley, Brenna, and Chloe, the same ones who used to call her wide-load Sarah in the hallways. "Oh my gosh, look who's still in town," Ashley said loud enough for half the store to hear. "Sarah May Johnson stacking frozen peas. Guess some things never change." Sarah May's face burned with shame, but she kept stocking shelves, pretending she didn't hear them. "Remember when she tried to get that job at Harrison's?" Brenna whispered, not whispering quiet enough. "My mom heard about that disaster from Mrs. Patterson." The frozen corn in Sarah May's hands felt heavier than concrete. Every muscle in her body wanted to run, to hide, to disappear into the floor. But then she thought about Tommy, who'd gotten new shoes with her first paycheck, and her daddy, who'd been able to quit that awful night job. "Excuse me, ladies." Mrs. Rodriguez appeared like an angel, her voice stern but polite. "If you're not buying anything, I'm going to need you to move along." After they left, Mrs. Rodriguez put a gentle hand on Sarah May's shoulder. "Don't you let those girls get to you, honey. You're worth 10 of them put together." But that night, Sarah May cried herself to sleep, wondering if she'd ever be able to escape the shadow of who she used to be. The next morning, though, she laced up those worn-out sneakers and walked to work anyway. Each step a declaration that she wasn't going to let anybody else define her worth ever again. That encounter with Ashley and her crew lit a fire in Sarah May's belly that burned hotter than a summer sidewalk. Instead of crushing her spirit, their cruel words became the fuel she needed to push herself even harder. She started getting up at 5 in the morning, not just to walk to work, but to jog. Well, it was more like a fast shuffle at first, her lungs burning, her legs shaking, sweat pouring down her face like a waterfall. But every step was a middle finger to everyone who'd ever counted her out. Mrs. Rodriguez noticed the change right away. "Girl, you're moving those boxes like they're feathers," she said one afternoon, watching Sarah May reload the dairy section without breaking a sweat. "I'm getting stronger, Mrs. R," Sarah May said, flexing her arm with a grin. "Turns out all that pain was just building muscle I didn't know I had." But the real test came 6 months later, when tragedy struck the Johnson family like lightning from a clear blue sky. Betty collapsed at the neighborhood laundromat, clutching her chest and gasping for air. The ambulance ride to Millfield General felt like the longest journey of Sarah May's life. "Heart attack," the doctor said, his words hitting harder than any punch. "She's stable now, but she's going to need surgery." The expensive surgery. Frank sat in that hospital waiting room, his head in his hands, looking older than his 50 years. "We don't have insurance that'll cover this," he whispered. "I don't know what we're going to do." Sarah May looked at her daddy, this strong man who'd worked himself to the bone for his family, breaking down in front of her, and something inside her shifted into high gear. "Daddy, listen to me," she said, grabbing his calloused hands. "I'm going to take care of this. I'm going to find a way." That night she prayed harder than she ever had in her life. "Lord, I know Mama's always been the one holding us together. Now it's my turn to be strong for her. Show me the way." The answer came the next morning when she saw a job posting at the hospital, physical therapy assistant. The pay was 3 times what she made at the grocery store, but it required heavy lifting and long hours on your feet. A year ago, Sarah May would have never even considered applying. But standing there, looking at that posting, she realized she wasn't the same broken girl who'd been rejected at Harrison Construction. She was someone entirely different now, someone stronger. Someone who'd learned that the heaviest weight she'd ever have to carry wasn't on her body, it was the weight of giving up on herself. The interview at Millfield General Hospital was scheduled for the same day as Betty's surgery. Talk about pressure cooking under fire. Sarah May sat in that sterile waiting room at 6 in the morning, still in her scrubs from an overnight shift at Miller's, praying for 2 miracles at once. Dr. Jennifer Walsh, the head of physical therapy, walked out and called her name. This was it, the moment that would determine whether her family sank or swam. Sarah Johnson? Dr. Walsh looked surprised, probably expecting someone different. But when their eyes met, Sarah May saw something she'd never seen before in a potential employer's face: respect. "Ma'am, I know what you're thinking," Sarah May said, standing up with confidence she'd earned through every drop of sweat, every aching muscle, every early morning when she wanted to quit but didn't. "But I can do this job better than anyone you'll interview today. For the next hour, Dr. Walsh put Sarah May through tests that would have destroyed the girl who walked into Harrison Construction 2 years ago. Lifting patients, demonstrating exercises, working with complex equipment. But this wasn't that girl anymore. "When can you start?" Dr. Walsh asked, shaking her head in amazement. "I've seen football players who couldn't do what you just did." The irony wasn't lost on Sarah May. The same body that Mr. Harrison had called useless was now strong enough to help others rebuild their lives. But life has a way of testing you, just when you think you've got it figured out. 3 hours later, while Sarah May was celebrating her new job, the surgeon came out with news that stopped her heart cold. "The surgery hit complications," he said, his face grave. "Your mother's in critical condition. The next 48 hours will tell us everything." That night, Sarah May sat beside Betty's hospital bed, holding her mama's hand and watching machines keep her alive. All the strength she'd built, all the confidence she'd gained, felt useless against this kind of pain. "Mama," she whispered, tears streaming down her face, "I finally got that good job you always believed I could get. I'm going to take care of you now, just like you took care of me." Betty's eyes fluttered open for just a moment, squeezing her daughter's hand with what little strength she had left. "My strong girl," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "I always knew. You were gonna fly." And then the machine started beeping in a way that made Sarah May's blood run cold. Betty Johnson passed away at 3:47 a.m. on a Tuesday morning, with Sarah May holding her hand and Frank crying like a baby in the corner. The strongest woman any of them had ever known just stopped fighting. And with her went the last piece of Sarah May's old life. The funeral was small but full of love. Mrs. Rodriguez came, Dr. Walsh came, even some of the patients Sarah May had been helping at the hospital showed up. But all Sarah May could think about was how her mama never got to see her in her new uniform, never got to see what her baby girl had become. "She knew, honey," Frank whispered as they stood by the grave. "She saw who you were becoming long before you did." For 3 weeks after the funeral, Sarah May threw herself into work like a woman possessed. 12-hour shifts at the hospital, helping patients who'd lost everything learn to walk again, to move again, to hope again. She was running on pure adrenaline and grief, barely sleeping, barely eating. Dr. Walsh pulled her aside one Friday evening. "Sarah, you've lost 60 pounds since you started here. You're working yourself into the ground." "I'm fine," Sarah May lied, but they both knew she wasn't. That weekend, Tommy came home from school with news that changed everything. "Sarah May, guess what? Mr. Harrison's company is going under. Mama's friend at the unemployment office said they're losing contracts left and right." Sarah May looked up from the bills she was paying, bills she could finally afford thanks to her hospital job, and felt something shift inside her chest. Monday morning, she was walking to work when she saw a familiar figure standing outside the hospital entrance. Mr. Harrison himself, looking older and more tired than she remembered, clutching a cane and walking with a limp. Their eyes met across the parking lot, and Sarah May watched recognition dawn on his face. This wasn't the heavy girl he'd humiliated 2 years ago. This was a strong, confident woman in medical scrubs, somebody who looked like she could handle anything life threw at her. He started walking toward her, his face red with embarrassment and something that looked like desperation. "Excuse me, miss," he called out, his voice shaking. I think we've met before. I'm Robert Harrison, and I was wondering, I heard you work here and I was hoping, maybe you could help me." Sarah May stopped dead in her tracks. The man who'd destroyed her self-worth was now asking for her help. Life sure had a funny way of coming full circle. Sarah May stood there in that hospital parking lot, staring at the man who'd shattered her world 2 years ago. Robert Harrison looked broken, his expensive suit wrinkled, his face gaunt, his whole body leaning heavy on that cane, like it was the only thing keeping him upright. "You don't remember me, do you?" she said, her voice steady as steel. "Sarah May Johnson, you told me I was too fat to fit through your warehouse doors." The color drained from his face like water down a drain. "Oh God, Sarah, I'm so sorry, I was—" "You were cruel," she finished for him, watching him squirm. "You humiliated me in front of a room full of people. You made me feel like I was worth nothing." Harrison's hands shook as he gripped his cane tighter. "I had a stroke 6 months ago. Lost everything, my business, my house, most of my so-called friends. The doctors say I need physical therapy if I ever want to walk normal again." Sarah May felt a surge of power she'd never experienced before. Here was her moment, her chance to look this man in the eye and tell him exactly what his rejection had cost her family. The sleepless nights, the unpaid bills, her mama's heart attack brought on by stress. "You want to know what happened after you threw me out?" she said, her voice rising with years of buried pain. "My family almost lost everything. My mama worked herself into a heart attack. My daddy took 3 jobs just to keep the lights on. And you went home to your big house and forgot I even existed." Harrison's eyes filled with tears. "Sarah, please. I know I don't deserve your help, but I'm begging you. I got nowhere else to turn." For a moment, Sarah May felt her mama's presence so strong, it was like Betty was standing right beside her, whispering the words she'd said 1,000 times. "Honey, hating somebody hurts you more than it hurts them." The choice was right there in front of her. Revenge or redemption, bitterness or forgiveness. Every fiber of her being wanted to walk away, to let him suffer like she had suffered. But then she looked at this broken man, really looked at him, and saw something that stopped her cold. He wasn't the powerful bully who'd destroyed her confidence anymore. He was just another human being who'd lost his way, scared and alone and needing help. "Mr. Harrison," she said finally, her voice softer now but still strong. "I'll help you, not because you deserve it, but because that's who I choose to be." And in that moment, Sarah May realized she'd won something bigger than revenge. She'd won herself back. 6 months later, Sarah May stood in the hospital's rehabilitation wing, watching Robert Harrison take his first independent steps without that cane. The man who'd once called her worthless was now walking because of her dedication, her expertise, her refusal to let bitterness poison her heart. "I can't believe it," he said, tears streaming down his face. "Sarah, you gave me my life back." But Sarah May knew the truth. She hadn't given him anything. She'd given herself everything by choosing forgiveness over revenge. Dr. Walsh approached with a huge grin on her face. "Sarah, I got news. The hospital board wants to promote you to head physical therapist. You've transformed more lives in 1 year than most people do in a lifetime." That evening, Sarah May drove to Millfield Cemetery and sat beside her mama's grave, the sunset painting the sky pink and gold like one of Betty's old quilts. "Mama," she whispered, placing fresh flowers on the headstone, "I wish you could see me now. I lost 120 pounds, but more than that, I found out who I really am inside." The wind rustled through the trees, and for a moment Sarah May could almost hear her mama's voice. "Baby girl, I always knew you were gonna fly." Frank and Tommy were waiting for her when she got home to their new apartment, a real nice place with 2 bathrooms and windows that actually opened. Tommy was 17 now, captain of his high school wrestling team and proud as punch of his big sister. "Sarah May," Frank said, hugging her tight, "your mama would be so proud. You saved our family." But Sarah May shook her head. "No, Daddy. Mama saved us long before I ever figured out how to save myself. She taught me that the strongest people aren't the ones who never fall down. They're the ones who get back up every single time." Later that night, Sarah May looked at herself in the mirror. Really looked. She saw strong arms that helped people heal, confident eyes that had learned to see her own worth, and a smile that came from knowing she'd turned her deepest pain into her greatest purpose. The girl who'd been rejected at Harrison Construction was gone forever. In her place stood a woman who'd learned the most important lesson of all. Your value isn't determined by what others think of you. It's determined by how you choose to treat others, especially when they don't deserve it. And as she turned off the lights that night, Sarah May smiled, knowing that tomorrow would bring new challenges, new people to help, and new opportunities to prove that the size of your heart matters so much more than the size of your body. Sometimes, the best revenge against those who hurt us is simply becoming the person we were always meant to be. Here's the bottom line, y'all. Sarah May's story isn't just about losing weight. It's about finding the warrior that was hiding inside her all along. Every cruel word that Robert Harrison spoke, every tear she cried, every moment she wanted to give up became the fuel that powered her transformation into someone unstoppable. The truth is this: right now, someone in your life is treating you like you're not good enough. Maybe it's your boss, maybe it's family members, maybe it's that voice in your own head that keeps telling you you'll never amount to anything. But what if, just what if, their rejection is actually God's redirection towards something bigger and better than you ever imagined? What pain are you carrying right now that could become your greatest power? Think about it. Every person who ever made you feel small, every door that got slammed in your face, every time someone looked at you and decided you weren't worth their time. What if all of that wasn't happening to you, but for you? When was the last time you looked at yourself in the mirror and saw a fighter instead of a victim? Sarah May spent months seeing herself through Robert Harrison's cruel eyes until she decided to see herself through God's eyes instead. Whose opinion of you matters more, the people who tear you down or the voice inside that keeps whispering, "You're stronger than you know"? What would you attempt if you knew for certain that the person who hurt you most would someday need your help? Because honey, life has a funny way of bringing our bullies back around when they're broken and desperate. The question is, will you be bitter or will you be better? If you died tomorrow, would the people at your funeral say you spent your life proving your worth to others, or would they say you spent it becoming the person you were meant to be? Because there's a huge difference, and time is the one thing you can never get back. Your transformation starts now. Stop waiting for permission to become extraordinary. Stop letting other people's limitations become your reality. Sarah May could have stayed that broken girl in the grocery store forever, but she chose to turn her pain into power, her rejection into rocket fuel. The same strength that carried her through losing her mama, facing her demons, and forgiving her enemy is available to you right this minute. The question isn't whether you're strong enough. The question is whether you're brave enough to find out just how strong you really are. If this story moved you, if it made you see possibilities you didn't know existed, then do me a favor. Hit that subscribe button and ring that notification bell, because there are more stories like Sarah May's coming your way. Stories about ordinary people who decided to become extraordinary, who turned their deepest wounds into their greatest victories. And hey, click on that video appearing on your screen right now to continue watching more life-changing stories that'll remind you that your current chapter isn't your final chapter. Your transformation is just getting started.